The best asset I know is the ESPN reporter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. She is Brooke Pryor, and she joins us on the Adam Gold Show. Did Mike Tomlin say he was going to name next week's starting quarterback today?
Not quite, because things with Mike Tomlin are never easy and never definitive.
Right.
He hit us with, as we sit here today, we are preparing as if Justin Fields will start against Denver.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that Justin Fields is definitely going to start against Denver. I think he's leaving a little bit of wiggle room for Russell Wilson. He said Russ is not going to fully participate in practice on Wednesday. Then they will go through what he is able to do with team doctors and then come up with a practice plan for the rest of the week and go from there. But it sounds like it will be Justin Fields unless this calf makes a remarkable recovery. But I think because Justin Fields played a turnover-free football game, mostly a mistake-free football game in that season opener in Atlanta, there's no reason to rush Russ back. That has been a tongue twister this entire time I've had to say it. Even with the revenge game narrative, even with all those things, it makes more sense to keep him on the sideline. Don't risk his short-term availability for his long-term health. I
am sad that we won't see Russell Wilson play against Sean Payton. I'm sad for that. Because I'm not saying I don't root for Russell Wilson. I don't root for him or against him. But against Sean Payton, I would be rooting for 600 yards and 9 touchdowns from Russell Wilson. That's what I think of Sean Payton. If both players were healthy, Brooke, who would you start?
Well, who I would start and who the Steelers would start are very different. I would, if I'm the decision maker, I'm going with Justin Fields, especially based off the last game that he had, because the errors that he made throughout his career in Chicago didn't show up in Sunday's game. He didn't have any turnovers. I thought he was largely smart with the ball. Granted, there were some things that he did in Chicago that were very much a part of that game, and that's to say that he was allergic to throwing to the middle of the field. I'm curious how much of that was Arthur Smith, how much of that was Justin Fields, how much of that was the line not being able to hold up or not wanting to test to see if it could hold up for some of those longer developing plays or just plays over the middle because they have some injuries there. But to me, Justin Fields did what they want Russell Wilson to do, plus he has the added mobility in his legs. We saw him run for a couple first downs, and I think that that's just an extra wrinkle that this offense really needs. But Mike Tomlin doesn't really believe in Wally Pipping a guy. I mean, Russell Wilson is going to be the starter if and when he's healthy, although, as he said today when he was asked that question, he's not going to soothe us with hypotheticals. So he's leaving it vague enough that he could change his policy, but I still think that if and when Russell Wilson gets healthy again, he will become the starter.
The bread and butter of that team is their defense and apparently their kicker. So even though Justin Fields did not produce a touchdown, they were good enough. They got 18 points, and the defense, and gosh, T.J. Watt is just so good. And they were good enough. So, again, why don't change it if it ain't broke? I don't know how much of the 49ers beat him down of the Jets you caught, but do you think it was
the whole thing?
You think it was more about San Francisco or the Jets?
I think that this was, honestly, I think it was both. There were parts of the Jets that I was pleasantly surprised to see, and other parts that I thought, oh, well, they are who we thought they were. And that is to say that Aaron Rodgers doesn't fix all of the problems that they have. And also, wow, Hassan Reddick has to be incredibly happy after that game because it became obvious how badly they need him because there was absolutely no pass rush. But to me, I think the game spoke more about the Jets' deficiencies than it necessarily taught us anything about the 49ers. We know that Kyle Shanahan has a masterful offense. We kind of know now that just about anybody can play running back in that offense and just produce a ton, even if your name is not Christian McCaffrey. I thought that was an incredibly impressive performance by Jordan Mason. Also, some impressive gamesmanship by Kyle Shanahan, who apparently told Jordan Mason that he was going to start on Friday, and then nobody else knew that was the case until the injury report came out last night. Of course, now there's some quibbling back and forth on what he really told Jordan Mason. All of those things are trying to avoid getting in trouble with the league.
Yeah, it should be an investigation because of that, right?
Well, there's always something with that team and with Kyle Shanahan's injury reporting practices.
No question about it. I find the whole thing funny and fascinating, and I do look forward to the league issuing a fine. What's your level of worry if you were a Cincinnati Bengals fan? Because I think the Patriots have a good defense. I don't think the Patriots, after trading their best defensive player, maybe their best player, have an amazing defense, and the Bengals kind of look sort of inept.
I got to say, I did not get to watch much of that game, but I will say that I have seen the Bengals play in week one before and lose games that they should not have lost in week one. I think it was 3 years ago that they lost to the Steelers in week one, and I believe that was the year they ended up playing in the Super Bowl, if not the year after. But it was a year that they ended up having still a pretty good season, but they lost to the Steelers, even though TJ Watt went down with what ended up being an injury that cost him half the season. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think, had a pick six on the second play of the game. So I've seen the Bengals be woefully underprepared for week one before. I'm not panicking if I'm the Bengals until week 2 or 3, and that starts to happen. It does stink for them, though, that you lose to the Patriots. Oh, and now you get to play the Kansas City Chiefs. Congratulations. That's not a game where you want to be hoping to exercise your demons. But I am not panicked about them yet.
There's a stat called expected points allowed. I'd never heard of it until 4 days ago. And apparently the 3 worst quarterbacks in the NFL last week were Bryce Young, Daniel Jones, and Joe Burrow.
Oh, that's not a group you want to be a part of.
No, that is a terrible list. No question about that. Philly and Green Bay played in Brazil. Dallas and Cleveland played in Cleveland. Well, the Browns might be as fascinating to watch meltdown as the Jets this year. And both teams, both Philly and Dallas, won. Do you have a sense of which win might be more impressive for you?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I was most impressed by Dallas, especially I think it was the first half that they were just really dominating. It felt like from what I was watching of the game, I think especially because the Browns were supposed to be a pretty good team. I mean, contenders to win the AFC North, everything else. To me, it showed, their offensive line. I know that they were down a couple guys, but they were not as good as they needed to be. Deshaun Watson, turns out, is not a good football player.
Nope.
In addition to all of his off-field things, it kind of makes it more difficult to justify having him there on that kind of contract. But the defense, the Cleveland's defense has Myles Garrett. They're supposed to be, one of the best defenses in the league, and Dallas didn't seem to have much of a problem. I'm sure Dak, though he didn't have a huge game necessarily, I think it has to help him. You got to be a little juiced up after you get the contract that you get right before the game. But yeah, I was really impressed with the Cowboys, and I think that win is going to mean a lot. I'm interested to see what the carryover is for the Eagles coming out of Brazil. Sometimes it's hard to keep momentum going off of those international games.
I thought you were going to say when you come back from Brazil. That it's very difficult to keep momentum. I've never been to Brazil, but I know it's apparently a pretty wild spot. Brooke Pryor is joining us, ESPN Steelers reporter at BE Pryor on Twitter. Strangely enough, Dak Prescott got more guaranteed money in his deal than Deshaun Watson has in his, although that's fully guaranteed. Although most of Dak's contract is fully guaranteed, is like $9 million. That isn't Garrett. At this point, why stop? Other than principle, but the dead cap hit on Watson's deal for not next year but the year after, I think, is $172 million. I don't even understand how you get a dead cap hit of $172 million in the final year of a deal. Like, the Browns might be playing with like 50 rookies on their team when we finally get to that point.
Right. That sounds like the answer to a math problem that I would skip in an exam. And I would say, I'll come back to that, and then I never do.
Right.
Yeah, it is. It's a bad situation. And, it's interesting, too, that there is now this new lawsuit filed against Watson that alleges sexual assault and battery. And I believe that something like that could void his deal with the Browns, which, it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. It's something that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on, as is the rest of the league. And I believe the league just came out with a statement and said he's not going to be put on the commissioner's exempt list at this point while they investigate this lawsuit and this claim. But, I mean, the Browns are in a really bad spot. And to me, the Schneiden fraud is even just greater because Deshaun Watson has just the terrible game that he has on Sunday, and Baker Mayfield goes out and has a great game in Tampa in his first game without Dave Canales, has a pretty solid performance, gets a win. I mean, if I'm the Browns, I'm looking at Baker and going, what could have been? Like, we thought we were making the right decision. We thought, look at this shiny object over here. We're going to throw out this other one, try to trade up, try to upgrade here, and it has backfired in a spectacular fashion.
Yeah, I was talking about I read the story about the lawsuit, and the details of it, you go, come on. But then you go back and you remember all the other stories of the 23 lawsuits that have already been settled of the original 24. And in almost every story that we read about that, you went, come on. But obviously they settled for a reason. So maybe everything about Deshaun Watson just has an element of, come on about it. Because, I mean, some people are just serial creeps. And, I mean, obviously that's putting it mildly for that guy. But holy cow. PFT commenter said it's possible he was a better person than a quarterback, and that is one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my entire life.
That is a pretty good line. I'm sure he was holding on to that for a while.
Brooke Pryor, at BE Pryor on Twitter, Steelers reporter for ESPN. I thank you so much, as always. I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Brooke Pryor here on The Adam Gold Show.